So we talked about natural selection, and we're going to talk about the different types. Keep in mind that natural selection has to do with some environmental influence. Name them. Overpopulation. Lack of resources. Pollution. Weather. Okay, anything that's going to affect the population from growing and reproducing and continuing to thrive, okay? So this first type of natural selection is called directional. Remember, always when I show you this, I'm going to show you an original population with a perfect bell-shaped curve. So in other words, I've got 4 of light-colored species, I've got 4 average color, and I've got 4 dark, right? Over time, something happens to the population that only the dark or the primarily one extreme, which in this case is dark, remember that it could shift the other way. So it could have been the other extreme, which is light, survive and reproduce. What do you think happened to this population of butterfly? That's a perfect scenario. You could say these butterflies' environment was primarily dark, hence the dark butterflies were able to camouflage better, so the light-colored butterflies were targeted, and over time, the population shifted in one direction. Good job. All right, now we have the next type of natural selection, what type of trait survives and reproduces? The average, good. The middleman. What kind of natural selection is this? Stabilizing. So because color is involved, you're going to think of the same scenario. Prey, a target, the population shifts over time. I want you to keep in mind that directional can shift to the right or to the left. It's not necessarily just this extreme. So let's say it was backwards where the environment was primarily light, the dark colored butterflies might be easier target, and over time they would disappear and the light colored would survive. So directional is one direction of the curve. Stabilizing is the average of the curve survives, okay? And then, and think of the words. Directional, one direction. Stable is in the middle, right? You're stable. And then you've got disruptive. And I always tell my students to remember that the word disruptive has a U in it. And this is a U-shaped curve. You see it? So try to remember it that way so you don't confuse one with the other. Disruptive has the letter U in it, and it forms a U-shaped curve. So in this case, what happens? Who survives? Good. Both extremes of the curve. Both extremes survive and reproduce that trait for future generations. So more types of evolution. Okay, we did natural selection is a type of evolution, and it actually explains almost every type of evolution, okay? Because at the end of the day, you are naturally selected by your environment based on certain conditions to survive and reproduce. Survival of the fittest. But a type of evolution that takes place where, I'm not going to describe it, is called coevolution. What happens here? Based on the little bit of research you were able to do.
It's like a mixture of both.
What do you mean by mixture of both? A combination of both doing what? Good. Populations of 2 different species evolving to live closely together. Remember, you always have to say the word population to describe natural selection, but the species within the population. So in this case, it's birds and flowers, or bees and flowers, or any organism that lives closely with a flower because it pollinates the flower, so it helps spread or helps the flower reproduce, and at the same time it's getting food. So it's a perfect evolution where they need each other in order to survive, and they benefit from each other, which is a type of relationship called mutualism. Another is evolution by artificial selection. What's happening here? That's my dog.
Oh, really?
That's Crystal. Yeah. What's happening though? Don't look at Crystal and the boat. Think of artificial selection, and what does that mean? Humans are deciding what?
Like the cross.
Good. They are genetically selecting specific traits of specific organisms so that they are able to obtain probably the most income or the most success, and or for other reasons. We do this with plants. What do we selectively breed plants for? Food. I'm on this chapter now with environmental. We have a serious problem with food production, so they genetically engineer plants to grow faster, and animals. So yes. Yeah, it's called GMOs, genetically modifying organisms, which usually involves genetic traits being manipulated so you could get the desirable trait. The last form of evolution, which is really what we consider the perfect example of what's happening today to show that evolution continues to exist, is evolution of resistance. What do you think that is? Looking at the picture, what's happening? You could like literally read the picture. Yeah, say, oh, what are you thinking?
Can I explain?
Yes.
Like when you pesticide these bugs, some of them can develop a resistance to the pesticide, and then they do like that,
And then you get like a super bug
yeah.
that is resistant to the pesticide, which means you need different pesticides. What else goes through that same cycle? So you don't just have pests becoming resistant, okay? Good. You've got bacteria. I get goosebumps when I go over this slide. So you have bacteria, which makes you sick. You take antibiotics to get better. The antibiotics don't work because the bacteria has evolved. This, or viruses. We now are experiencing influenza, yes, is resistant to the vaccine. There's so many strains of influenza because they mutate and evolve. And before you know it, you have 17 different strains that are basically nothing is going to get to them of what we've recognized as medicine. So I have a video to show you for that too.